box, don't you? You just have to have this positive attitude. And, this comes back to what I was saying to you. As a child, I realized this. If you think you're going to fail, you're going to fail. So every driving test, all of those ones I told you I failed, I would get in the car and this booming, deafening voice was saying, you are going to fail. And sure enough, I'd mount the pavement. I got stopped by the police once because I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Yeah, on a driving test. But because it was almost like self-fulfillment of my mind's attitude. And it was only actually working with Olympians that I've done now. When I climbed Everest, I went with Victoria Pendleton, the cyclist. When I rode the Atlantic, it was with James Cracknell. And I've been lucky enough to work with some other Olympians that I realized you need this absolute confidence verging on arrogance that I will get to the top of this mountain. I will reach the South Pole. Because as soon as you go into an event where there's any self-doubt, it will be self-fulfilling. You must know that. You must know that.
But it's impossible to fake, in my view. Like I'm quite repelled by this culture of like people looking in the mirror and saying, you are going to be a millionaire, you are great. But because my opinion of how beliefs work, like, so I always use this example, this fifth millionth time I've said this. If I were to hold your loved one at gunpoint now and say, believe I'm Jesus or I kill them, there's nothing you could do to actually believe I was Jesus. You could only lie to me. Because that's not how belief works. As you've proven, beliefs take evidence, and you've built that evidence through your challenges, right? So like just telling yourself to believe something doesn't work, even if everything is on the line. But if I suddenly turn this into wine and then started levitating, you might think, wait a minute.
But you're taking it slightly too literally when it comes to what that is. So here's the thing. There's a man called Mark Boyle who lives in Ireland, a fascinating man. I think you should get him on here. He has lived as the moneyless man, and he gave up everything and tried to live without any money for a year, and he ended up with a house. Is what he did by charming, trading up, literally just working his way through the system, but never ever using money. It was always trade and barter and borrowing, and I don't think there was any stealing, not that I know of. But I love this notion that he had an absolute confidence that this would work and that he would be able to do it. Now, with something like Everest, you're right. You couldn't just take someone off the street and say, believe you're going to climb this mountain and you're going to get to the summit, because you need to do with the climatization. You have to get yourself physically ready. You have to understand about high altitude, and you have to understand the basics of climbing at least. So you're right. But even with all that, if you go into that arena as such, into the mountains with any doubt, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy that you won't succeed. So I think this idea of belief that you can, you're right, it's much more than just looking in the mirror and going, I'm going to be the best musician in the world. This comes back to school kids who aspire for fame. I think it's the kind of the X Factor, Britain's Got Talent has a lot to answer for, because it's kind of made this illusion that anyone can be whatever they want in life. Now, part of my whole, I suppose part of the story that I tell is that you can follow your dreams, but I always say that with the caveat that it has to be reasonable. If your dream is to be a top footballer, you're going to have to be pretty good. Well, there you go.
And here I am.
Well, there you go. But you have to be. But if someone comes up to me and a youngster says, I really want to just be a top footballer, I want to play with a Premiership club, I don't see why they can't. But there has to be a base level of pretty brilliant football from a start. Do you see what I mean?
Of course.
So I think you have to be realistic with those aspirations. If someone wants to be a top neuroscientist or a top doctor, I don't see why they can't, but they have to have. It was going to be impossible for me. I wanted to be a vet, and I think I would have been quite a good vet, but I just didn't have the academics, so I didn't even get off the start plate. I think it's a really important thing to reiterate to people that I do believe in that mindset. Believe you can. Ant Middleton, who's been on here, he's another keen advocate of that. Just believe in yourself, this positive mindset. But the positive mindset has to also marry up with ability and skill.
So I completely agree. with the because I genuinely
I think there's a but coming here.
Yeah, no. So it's actually not a but to your point. It's a question about how do you achieve this point, because I completely agree. When I've been asked what my talent was, I was like, can't spell, can't do math still, probably dyslexic, just never gone to check. But I just always believed, that's what I've always said for my whole life, I always believed I was going to so think about what I wrote in my diary as a kid that didn't have a driving test. His parents went speaking to him, was shoplifting pizzas, going to be a millionaire within 4 years, going to have a Range Rover Sports, can be my first car. Hadn't done. I genuinely believed it. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was the gift that life gave me, was this like low-key delusional belief. And that took me out of, and so when I was living in Moss Side, stealing pizzas and stuff, I started recording it in my diary and doing little videos. And it's crazy. In the first page of my diary, I lied to my diary. I said, I'm recording this journey because a production company has asked me to. Because
you lied to yourself.
I lied in my own, because I couldn't, I almost didn't know how to say to my diary that this was going to be part of a story I was going to tell one day. And it's like, I'll show my diary in the first page of it. It's like, because, and also because I think I'm going to have to tell this story one day. That is a guy that saw himself on an island and knew he was getting off the island and wanted to, wasn't dwelling on it. So I completely agree. I think the only reason I'm here is not because of smarts. My parents were completely broke. Obviously I had privileges of being born in this country, well, born in Africa actually, but it was just that I always believed I'd be here. However, when I try and impose that onto people and tell them the importance of self-belief, and I see these people who have got their confidence just absolutely in the bin because of experiences they've had, or their dad when they were 4 years old told them that they're a piece of shit, and my fluffy words at when they're 35 aren't stronger than those words that their dad said to them. I struggle to try and tell them how to get to that place of genuine self-belief, because as I said, you can't fake it. If Steve had a shred of doubt in Moss Side, I'd still be there. So what do I say to that person?
Well, it's the building blocks of life, isn't it? It comes back to that. So if the series of challenges and things that I've done in my life have slowly built themselves up. So I started on that year on living on an island in the Outer Hebrides. Now, if you strip that back, it was pretty simple. It couldn't really fail. It was hard work. It was hard being away from people, no contact with the outside world, no phones, mobiles, family. I didn't see anyone for a whole year, just this small group of people. Well, once I did that, it was kind of, that was like the foundations. I was like, oh my gosh, well, I've done this. And then I put the next block in, which was running the Marathon des Sables, 6 marathons in 6 days. I'd never even run 100 meters, Stephen. And suddenly here I was agreeing to run across the Sahara Desert. And I managed to get through that. I came last, but I managed to do it. And these building blocks have just gone up. So when you say to people, when you're trying to encourage, as I do as well, people to this self-belief, it has to be a realistic self-belief of the slow building blocks of life. If we come back to kind of reality shows, because I'm slightly obsessed with reality shows and this kind of what's happened over the last 20 years, what it's done is it's given people this belief that anyone can become world famous overnight. And I've already alluded to Britain's Got Talent, X Factor, but Big Brother, Love Island, all of those shows, because it takes everyday folk and it catapults them onto the front pages of newspapers, 5 million followers overnight on social media and earning quite a lot of money. But how long does that last for? Now, for many people, it's the famous Andy Warhol, only 15 minutes. It doesn't last very long, because what happens is there's no substance to it. There's no roots. And what happens is the next show comes along and they're cast aside. But what also a lot of people do is that the leap from one brick to the next is too high. And if you go too big, it's doomed to failure. I remember, funny enough, I think one of the reasons why me, a reality show contestant, is still working in TV after 21 years, because my 15 minutes was up a long time ago. I think the reason is more because of the things that I turned down than the things that I agreed to do. So I turned down some pretty big shows, big prime time Saturday night shows that a lot of people who work in TV would be like, I would do anything for that. But the leap was too big. And I didn't believe that. I think the even though I like to confront risks, I like to be realistic with those. So K2 is a far more dangerous mountain than Everest. I could have gone straight to K2, but instead I want to do a sensible building block up to that ultimate challenge. And I think right back to television, I think if you take too big a leap, then the reality of continued success is eroded away.
When you think about some of those opportunities that you were given that you turned down, what was it about them that made you think it was too big of a leap? Because I'm trying to answer the question for my viewer, which is, how do I know if it's too big of a leap?
I think you just have to be sensible about what you're capable of. I think, so it's this really fine line. I told you I'm full of contradictions. Yeah. So I'm telling you, I'm sitting here kind of saying to people, follow your dreams. Don't be told that you can't do it. No dream is too big. Believe in yourself and you're halfway there. I really do believe in all of that, but you also have to be sensible. So I think, so here's the thing. I reckon that I'm the son of an actress. And I believe that I could be an actor. I always wanted to be an actor. I got rejected by all the drama schools, by the way, because I couldn't remember my lines. But that's a whole other thing. But I still think I could be an actor. And I have quite a confidence that I could. But if I was suddenly offered a Steven Spielberg film, I wouldn't take that now, because my ultimate goal is to try the acting thing at some stage in my life when it's appropriate. But I don't want to do it in such a big extreme explosion of public ridicule if it goes wrong. Now I together with that, I add this sort of confidence that yes, I will be able to do it, but I'd prefer to start in a little pub theatre with 20 people just on a smaller stage and build up, because there has to be, and I think we all have to agree with this, as well as this confidence and this self-belief, you have to have the skills. Yeah, if you don't have the skills, there's just no point, and we're just being delusional. And it's no different to that Instagram fakery of showing people this idyllic life when actually that's just a tiny little 1 second of actually what was a really miserable weekend, because it was the only time the sun came out and you threw on a bikini. I didn't throw on a bikini, but you get my point. Yeah. To show that instant moment of perfection. So I think there has to be an actual skill, and you have to earn it. I think this instant gratification just doesn't exist. There is a few examples, and you're one of those, where you were able to write down, I'm going to be a millionaire, I'm going to have that Range Rover Sport, and you did it. And you are what gives so many people hope.
But I failed. I failed in my first company. But the second one,
it doesn't matter. But that doesn't matter. Surely failure. If you haven't failed, you haven't been trying hard enough.
Yeah.
Do you think? I think the people who, because I realized that quite early on. If you haven't failed at various points through your life, then you're being too measured with the challenge that you take,
which is a failure.
Which is a failure in itself. Yeah.
Yeah. So many of the things you said there, I was just, I was captivated by. I was wondering whether so you said you were a contradiction at the start of this conversation, but then you've also alluded to the fact that you like to not be on either pole, and you like to be like the sheep in the field, which actually probably makes sense, because you can appreciate the need for ambition, but then you also appreciate the need to have self-awareness, right? So it kind of puts you in the middle of the field somewhere.
Well, if you think about it, it's a really weird thing, because I'm actually, again, true to the contradictions, the son of an actress, I've kind of got the jazz hands, and I quite like talking, and I like being on stage as such, but I'm also still quite shy. So I kind of like being in the wings. I want to be on the stage, then I want to be in the wings, then I want to be on the stage. And the same goes for kind of how I project myself. So I want to be part of the conversation, but then I don't want to be part of the conversation. I don't like the uncomfortableness of it. I want to be a politician, but I couldn't bear the focus and the derision that you're going to get from one side or the other. And I actually think once you've accepted that, because I think I'm sure a lot of people are like that, really. And once you've accepted that's who you are, you just work out how to walk those stepping stones and kind of move around it. And I kind of do this, I dance my way through it and dip in and dip out. And I have moments where I wish I hadn't I wasn't on the middle of that stage, but I am, so I own it. And it's back to this whole thing. I do believe you kind of have to own your narrative. It's very easy to let someone else steal it from you.
I think I actually read that on the last page of the first chapter of your book. It said, the ocean had taught me to take control of my own narrative and believe in myself.
Mm-hmm.
When you were talking about what you learned from the sea in your book, Inspire: The Lessons from the Wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And that taking control of your narrative point really stuck with me.